Thank you, Margaret. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this, the First Place and Economic Development Committee meeting of 2025. Start off by wishing you all a happy new year. And that will be the last time I say that this year. Just a brief announcement to make through, then to go through first. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking, and if you could remember to switch them off after you've finished as well, that would be really helpful. On to the agenda then. Appointment of substitutes, please, Margaret.
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Murray for Councillor Orcott and Councillor Scott for Councillor Barnes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest?
I'm a trustee on the Lippard Hub.
Thank you. Sarah?
I'm also a trustee on the Lippard Hub.
Yes, Chair of Worcester Mellor.
I'm a member of Worcester Theatres Board.
Chair of the Elgar Festival.
I don't know if I have to declare this because I attend WMC and I think they administer the DWAS fund.
Right.
Yeah.
I have recalled that I'm also a member of Worcester Arts Council, which is on here.
I'm also Worcester Arts Council.
Chair, if I may, I'm just thinking on my feet in terms of how many members are appointed to outside bodies and we're discussing grants tonight. I think I'd like to draw a distinction between where we're discussing broad principles and things are being referred on to Policy and Resources Committee, and those where a member may be considered to have a very direct personal interest. So I think I will just review the report before we get to that item. I think that there is probably one member who will wish to declare a personal interest and leave for the item. But I'm not sure that that necessarily relates to everybody appointed to all the other boards appointed by the council. So if you just bear with me, Chair, I'll continue to do that as we carry on.
Thank you. Seeing any? Page 2. Nothing, thank you. Page 3. No. Page 4. No. And then finally, no, yeah, page 5. No, thank you very much. So on to the first item, on to the Q3 performance report for 2024-25. Who's introducing this? Thank you, Zoe.
It's to note the details in the Appendix 1, which gives all the targets and outputs, and also 2 potential changes for deadlines for future High Street. One is the Public Realm and one is Angel Place. These are impacted by the developments at the Scala, so they're going to be slightly later in finishing, but should be completed by March 26, alongside of all of the delivery with the Scala. If you look through the report, it's quite positive. Lots of greens across the report. But if there are any queries, please let me know.
Louis?
I think the report mentions something about the Arches project and the opening up of the new walkway. Could you, I think it was reported before that it was going to be open by Christmas. I wonder if you could give us a quick update on that.
It's likely we are looking at a deadline of the end of Q4 for this year, so it is progressing very, very well, and it is imminently due to finish. So we're looking probably end of March, beginning of April for completion.
Tor?
Have we had any update on whether the government has released their plans for HS2 funding? It's mentioned in this report. Yeah, it's HS2. It's mentioned in this report on page 6 of the appendix.
Yeah, we've had no update so far on it. It's not come through to us as yet.
Can we just have an indication that we're all happy to note that report then? Thank you. Any abstentions? No. And any noes? No. Okay. Thank you. That was easy. Over to you, Kevin, for the Shrub Hill Quarter Regeneration Programme update.
Thank you. Yes, this is a short report with an update on progress on the Shrub Hill Regeneration Programme. You'll know that this is a programme for the regeneration of what we now call the Shrub Hill Quarter, where City Council and County Council are very much working together in collaboration on this. There's a joint steering group on which 2 senior members from each authority are represented. So since last reported about 12 months ago, the Towns Fund, the 10 million Towns Fund, which has purpose to help the delivery of the first phase of the regeneration, those 2 projects have moved on. The Public Realm project, which is to build a new 5-metre wide bicycle pedestrian route from bottom of Cromwell Street over the canal to Pheasant Street to link into St Martin's Quarter. Since we last met, we have a confirmed compulsory purchase order to make sure there's no issues in securing possession of the land. And the design of the scheme has progressed to the extent that the detailed design is now ready and is being priced by the County Council's contractor. And our solicitors are lined up to serve the necessary notices under the compulsory purchase order to secure possession of the land and enable the start on that scheme in April of this year, and this should be completed before the end of the next financial year in line with the Towns Fund programme deadlines. Meanwhile, obviously, discussions continue with all the landowners there to sort out the detail of land acquisition and compensation by agreement, but compulsory purchase is there as a backup. The second strand of the Towns Fund project is around Isaac Maddox House and the putting that building back into good repair and refurbishing and fitting that out to provide about 40,000 square foot of workspace. Planning permission for the scheme was granted last September, and the County Council has appointed Speller Metcalfe as the contractor to fit the building out. It's the contractor's job to take the current design from a REBA 3 level to REBA 4 and price that. Earlier last year, the interior of the building was basically gutted, so that's enabled a long, hard look at the condition of the building and do further investigations. Since the report was written, I must admit I wrote this in the Christmas New Year period, taken the design to a REBA stage 4 level, and pricing it has taken longer than anticipated. Obviously, taking into account the condition of the building that's now exposed in some of the places. We're having a long, hard look and further surveys where necessary. So I think that's likely to put back a start on the fit out a little later than March, as noted in this report. But we'll be bringing, once we've county and ourselves are settled on the way forward, we'll bring an update on the proposed programme to the member reference group in the first instance. Also last year, you'll be aware at this committee that we published a draft supplementary planning document for public consultation, which was very well received, and that was adopted by the council last autumn and now provides the master planning framework for how we'd like to see development brought forward in the area over the next 5 to 10 years. So it's not just helpful from a planning point of view, it's also a very useful statement that gives other people looking to invest in the area the confidence that they know what the two councils want, and that very much we're able to use as a marketing tool, because one of the other important strands of this programme is the County Council just about to kick off the marketing and the procurement of a lead developer. You appreciate that the County Council, in their previous purchase of the St Bodwin's industrial estate, now gives basically the public sector about a third of the ownership in the Shop Hill quarter, and procuring a lead developer with a decent background in regeneration is a really important next step for the success of the programme. Also, the County Council has been using brownfield land remediation grant to firstly prepare a site for residential development within the lower yard, which is the first area of development to be brought forward, and has also been successful in being awarded similar grant for the clearance of some dilapidated industrial premises on the other side of Shub Hill as well, and that's something that will be undertaken later in the year. It's important to note that whilst premises have been demolished, every business that has wanted to remain in business and trading has successfully found premises elsewhere, which is obviously pleasing to note. So this year will still be a very busy year in terms of the construction of the shared use route. There should be a start on the refurbishment and fit out of Isaac Maddox House, and as I say, we'll bring a subsequent report about just confirming the programme for that. Should also see the demolition of other buildings on the industrial site to form site for new housing, and we'll also see the procurement of a lead developer. So that's a short report on progress, and obviously happy to take any queries, questions.
Start with Adam, thank you.
Thanks very much. Since the SPD was concluded, there's been government announcements about the requirements for additional housing within the city and indeed across the country. And given that the SPD, while it made distinct reference to Ford Maddock House being employment use, large parts of the other new developments, the new build, were either or. Do you see that the balance between employment creation development and housing development is likely to shift as a result of us needing to meet the necessary government targets for new housing?
If Duncan, Head of Planning, was here, I'd probably refer that question to Duncan, because I'm not close enough to understand the impact of the latest MPF and what that means for kind of, South Worcestershire's need for housing and where those additional numbers are coming from. You're quite right to say that within the supplementary planning document, we've retained the flexibility of kind of employment uses and residential uses. And certainly in the early years, it's possibly a question more of which is the more viable to bring forward. And just at the moment, then probably residential development is probably more viable at this stage to take forward.
I can just come back on that then. Well, given the demand that we have in the city for new employment space of a wide variety of types, I would urge your work and of others' work involved with a joint working with the County Council on making sure that you have a specific look at creating a range of employment opportunities or business opportunities for new businesses and existing businesses to form.
Yeah, we certainly will.
Thank you. Jabba?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Now, obviously, it's an update report from the County Council. Given the current climate that we're living in and the state of finances up at County Hall, and several other projects are overrunning and almost doubling in recent time, we don't really have a breakdown of understanding of where these costs, the £10 million that have been allocated, where it's been allocated to, whether it's going to be over budget, and what it's going to cost to actually deliver this in terms of that, and rather the precarious situation that obviously County Hall find themselves in, and if it's ideologically driven to get this done, at what cost, and what else is going to be affected as a result of it. Do we have an understanding of what the financials look like to this date?
Yes, we have a decent understanding, but as I referred to earlier, we're still in the process of that design process and the costing process of kind of finalising what can be kind of presented and agreed to take forward. Isaac Maddox House, you'll know, is it does lend itself to a phased incremental refurbishment. It's the sort of place, we know that it is not going to be full of tenants from day one, just by the very nature, just by the very size of the place. So it does lend itself to an incremental phased fit out. But it's always been the plan to deal with the condition issues of the building, the common areas of the building, and the basic plant and machinery, and allow the phased fit out of a decent amount of kind of space within the envelope of the funding that we have, and then take it from there. But I certainly commit to kind of reporting to the member reference group once those costings have been finalised, and then we'll show you the plan for taking that forward.
Thank you. Edward, did you have a question? I misread your hand. Adrian?
I've got two questions, Chair, if you don't mind. First is related to the performance report, because it flags as amber in there, and I wasn't clear from your report, Kevin, what is causing that. And shall I do that first and I'll ask you a second question? My second question is about the car park. It seems a long time ago that we agreed that the county council could knock down that internal car park at the edge of Tollerdown Road on the corner as it comes towards the apex of the building. But I haven't seen any movement or activity there since we agreed that.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my brains as to why we're showing an amber on Shop Hill in the performance report, but I may have to come back to you on that. And yeah, the demolition of the apron behind the engine shed, and the parking. Again, that's something I will need the county council themselves to confirm the programme for that, and I'll report back to you. And I would suggest the ward members as well. The ward members. Okay.
Thanks, Kevin. I've got Jill, then Louis, and then Edward.
Chair. So one of the blocks in Shrub Hill has been completed for a while and it's still completely empty. I'd like to know why that is, but looking at the plan overall, it was noted that most of the accommodation seemed to be one-bedroomed. And given they have this huge shortage of 3 and 4 bedroom accommodation in the city, is there an opportunity to rebalance that at all?
Thank you. I think what you're referring to is the blocks completed at Sheriff's Gate, which is actually sits outside of what we call Shop Hill Quarter and is encompassed in the supplementary planning document. So I'm afraid I can't, because that's a private development, and I can't really say.
No, so fine, leave that, but still in terms of Shrub Hill, am I right in remembering that predominantly it's...
No, there's no decision taken. There are no plans in terms of the detail of any residential development on Shop Hill at the moment, so there's nothing that would dictate that it's one-bedroomed.
Okay, well that's good. Can I ask that there is consideration for it being 3 and 4 bed, some of it, a good deal of it being 3 and 4 bed? Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Louis?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question really about the environmental credentials of the project. On your report, section 5.8, it says the regeneration of the Shrub Hill Quarter is expected to have significant social, environmental and economic implications through land use changes and the provision of new housing and employment opportunities. The SPD emphasises the desire to achieve this in a sustainable way. Now, my question really is, the wording there is a desire to achieve it. It's not very concrete. A few years ago, we as a council, on a cross-party basis, declared a climate emergency, and we said that we wanted to be climate neutral by 2030. So obviously, large pieces of infrastructure and big building projects, which are going to be here for decades in the future, we need to make sure they're as environmentally sound as possible. So my question is, are we just building to building regs, or are we going beyond building regs?
Well, to answer that, I think there's two levels. There's where the local authorities are the owner of the land and are seeking to procure a developer, then that's obviously a choice for the local authorities as vendors, procurers of that development to specify the level, what level the development should be built out at. Now, quite clearly at the moment, the county council is a landowner, and that's something that we would work with the county council in setting the specification of any development to be procured. The supplementary planning document, in terms of the standards expected, mirrors the emerging, the new South Worcestershire development plan. So it would be at that level. The SPD kind of gives a further tool to insist on those levels of those standards that are expected through the development plan.
Sorry, can we expect any sort of significant parts of the project to be good examples of where, I don't know, using district heating or anything else that we can expect that's above and beyond what we'd see on a regular new development? Say, bear in mind our declared climate emergency.
The SPD does clearly lay out that a district heating on large-scale development within the quarter, then the developer will have to investigate and show the practicalities of a district heating scheme. It has to be investigated and demonstrated whether it's kind of feasible or not feasible. So there's it's not something that can just be kind of ruled out and not taken forward at all. It has to be clearly demonstrated to comply with the SPD that whether or not a district heating scheme would work.
Okay.
Thank you. Edward?
Thank you, Chair. Really just building on the comments from Jill, actually, because I think it's a very important point. If the balance of housing proposed for the development hasn't been set, then could I ask very specifically that the housing team here at the City Council be consulted and asked for input into the balance of housing that's going to be set up? I'd be very disappointed, I think, if it was just a block of single-bed flats, all of the same type. One of the major pitfalls with developments of this sort is that they end up with the same kind of generic housing. Is that a mandate that we could set down or ask for? Thank you.
The answer is yes to that. I think where you've got two local authorities as the lead procurement of any development, then we would obviously very much want to see that development serving local needs.
And if I could add as well, the leader of the council and myself sit on the steering committee, so we do have regular meetings, and we can add those priorities at those meetings.
Yes, Chair. Just to follow up on that point, obviously this development sits in Fort Royal. Fort Royal, the way it's been with the present community, with the present boundaries, is a distinct community, has a soul, has a life, has a real good family feel about it. Obviously, we're not going to 100% replicate that, but it has to be borne into mind into the master plan in terms of being able to create a community there and run not siloed individual homes behind locked barriers that are hard to access, that are owned by real estate people in London.
A good point, well made. Thank you, Trevor. Any further questions? Katie?
Just a point of clarity. Despite the fact that I've been through these papers at length previously when the consultation was open, I just want to ask about the walking and cycling route. Lovely, very exciting. And I just want to double check that the plan is not, or is the plan to end up, you're having your lovely walk from Shrub Hill, you're going off into the city, lovely, or on your bike. Just want to check that we're not being funneled through Asda car park, or are we?
Well, as a pedestrian, you've got a choice whether to carry on through Asda car park and we've always set aside a certain amount of the Towns Fund budget to deal with what you know to be is a very sort of gloomy place, and we have instructed someone to come up with some ideas, and we have opened a discussion with ASDA as well. So that is something, that is a follow-on that definitely will be tackled. It's always been the intention to tackle, to make that route through ASDA car park far brighter, far cleaner, and to hopefully get ASDA to manage it better than perhaps it is at the moment.
Yeah, if I may, thank you. Just because it would be a real shame for your journey into the city centre to be spoilt in that way. But more pressing is from a personal safety and from a road safety perspective, it would really not be good enough, and would, I think, represent what's usually Worcestershire County Council's complete lack of ambition when it comes to active travel. And I hope that we can push and be much more progressive about it. Thank you.
Anything else? No? Can I just see some indication that we're happy to accept, to note the report? Thank you, everybody. I think that was unanimous. No abstentions, no noes. Right. Before we go on to UK SPF, Sian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, at the start of the meeting, it caught me by unawares just how many members were appointed to outside bodies who were going to review the grant item tonight. So Margaret and I were just doing a tally, and it is the majority of members here tonight. So I've turned up the Localism Act because you'll probably remember, members, that there is a dispensation that can be given for members to participate in an item where they may otherwise have an interest that would preclude them. And that can be granted where we consider that without the dispensation, the number of persons prohibited from participating would be so great, a proportion of the body transacting the business, as to impede the transaction of that business. So it would take out so many people, it would render the debate very challenging, and or it would affect the different representation of different political groups, would be so upset as to likely alter the outcome of the vote. I don't suspect that's the one here, but the point in the Localism Act is that a dispensation can be agreed where in all other circumstances it would prevent a sensible debate taking place. So I must ask members that, provided you can approach the issue nevertheless with an open mind, as luck would have it, the Chair of Standards Committee is here tonight. So provided that everybody is comfortable that that's the basis in good faith on which we will consider the grants item, then I wouldn't then differentiate between any of the members who are recipients of, who are on outside bodies that may be the recipients of funding. I know that some of those on outside bodies that are the recipients of funding have been appointed by the council, and some of them have not been appointed by the council, but I am aware of no instances in which those individuals are receiving any remuneration for those roles. So on that basis, I would suggest that all parties can be considered equal on that basis. Chair, you've got the Chair of Standards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on that point, Sian. I was coming here this evening to accompany Ray Morris, who was going to speak about the grant for Lippard Hub, and I have a very short speech prepared to back up what he was going to say. He unfortunately couldn't make it because he's not very well. Does that then preclude me? I'm quite happy to not raise my hand and vote on anything, but can I still speak on that matter?
Through you, Chair. Yes, it's the difference between predisposed and predetermined. As long as members feel tonight that they can still approach the issues with an open mind, then they should feel free to vote and speak on all matters.
Thank you. Meaningful pause there. Zoe, UK SPF. David's going to kick off now. Better hide.
Yeah, if I'm allowed, we're running out of people. I think I'm okay on this one. So you have three documents in front of you. You've got the main report, you've got the appendix, and then you've got a briefing paper that I will hand over to to the chair, which relates to the outcome of the town board meeting that took place last Thursday. So starting with the main report, I suppose really there's no real way of sugarcoating the situation we find ourselves in with regard to the budget. So this year, 24-25, to which we are just coming to the end, we had £1.8 million of UK SPF funding. That was the third year of the 3-year allocation. And you'll see at the beginning in paragraph 2.2, the allocation this year is about 786,000 of revenue and 178,000 of capital. So by any stretch of the imagination, a very, very, very significant reduction in the funding that we have available. And officers, a number of us, myself, Zoe and Sal, have sat down and tried really to do the best job we can in providing a recommendation to members on how that money should be allocated. You'll see in section 2.3 that the government requirements are that the money is spread over 3 themes: communities and place, local business, and people and skills. I won't go through those individually, only to say that it covers just about everything. You know, there is nothing that springs to mind that those themes preclude us from investing money in. I won't go through all of the report that sets out the previous expenditure or expenditure up until the end of this year. I'll take that as read, if I may. What I'll do is move on to paragraph, section 3, preferred option. And so in addition to the £1 million reduction that we are facing on UK SPF, members will know that the council is also facing a circa 900,000 shortfall in the revenue budget for next year, to add to the challenge, for want of a better word. And so section 3 sets out really the approach that we have taken in coming to a recommendation on how the money should be split. So first of all, we've looked at existing revenue commitments that the City Council has and looked to identify where we can use UK SPF funding to reduce the Council's 900,000 deficit for next year. We've also looked at the projects that have formed part of the 3-year programme and where those projects have a successful track record of delivery and, in our view, have offered some value for money, we have recommended that some of those will continue as well. And of course, we have one eye on the City Council's emerging 2025-2030 city plan to ensure that all of these projects, as I would describe them, support the ongoing aims and ambitions of the City Council. So there are 2 elements to this report. One is the revenue allocation and one is the capital allocation. I'll do the latter first, as it's relatively straightforward from this point in time. Members will also recall that we submitted a levelling up application to the previous government for £5 million that included a number of capital projects that were supporting partners, as well as the City Council's own Scala and Cornmarket project. We then heard after the election that the new government was minded to cancel that allocation or not proceed with it. Whether you believe it was allocated or not, it's a moot point. And we've been promised that we will hear this week in response to the consultation that was undertaken just before Christmas. So we have responded to a consultation process. I do hope that some of the 5 million will be forthcoming. My hope is not strong, given where we are in terms of the local and national picture. But the recommendation this evening is to park the decision with regard to the capital allocation and wait until the government has made its determination on the Levelling Up Fund. Once we know if we have or haven't got any of the Levelling Up money, we will then bring a recommendation back to members in terms of future priorities for that money. And that could include some of the projects that have been unsuccessful in the Levelling Up. So, for example, there was a significant amount of funding for the Swan Theatre to improve disabled access and toilet facilities. And there was also a significant element of funding for Tudor House to improve their visitor centre and improve their amenities for schools visits. I'm very much aware that there are other priorities that might call upon this money. Some of the council's own priorities around reducing its own carbon footprint might be something that members wish to consider as well. But as of this evening, we recommend that we park that and await the outcome of the Levelling Up consultation. So if I now go back to the main element, which is the revenue funding, you'll see in the appendix the proposal for splitting that money, and broadly it falls into two categories. The first category are projects that the City Council supports has been supporting on an ongoing basis using its own revenue funding. It puts us in a very difficult position with the shortfall next year to proceed with these projects with our own revenue funding. So the recommendation is that these fall within the UK SPF. I'll come back to the detail in a moment. And then the second component is existing UK SPF projects that we believe have significant validity in continuing. In terms of consultation, officers met with group leaders a week or so ago and set out the proposals. Subsequent to that, we had a Towns Board meeting last week made up of a range of stakeholders. The recommendations were broadly supported. Everybody acknowledged the fact that we were all in a very, very difficult position. There were some suggested changes, and the outcome from the town deal meeting with stakeholders forms the basis of the recommendations that have been tabled this evening in terms of changes. So I'll just very briefly go through the appendix, and you can see where most of these are continuations of existing support to Worcester Community Trust, citizens' advice. We have an element in there for discretionary welfare assistance scheme, and the reason that is in there is because whilst the household support fund seems to have more lives than the cat at the moment, it's been cancelled that many times and then reintroduced. At the moment, we don't know if it is going to be actually continued beyond the end of this year. That's not to say it won't. Everybody knows that these announcements in the past have been very, very late in the day. So fingers crossed. If we do get Household Support Fund, then it will be a recommendation back to members on both how to deploy the Household Support Fund and then what to do with the UK SPF that was earmarked for discretionary welfare assistance. Members may have a choice if we get some additional fund. The next three, Worcester Runs, Worcester Wheels and Worcester Festivals, all of those projects are on a tapering support level. So we are reducing, all of those organisations have been told that we are reducing their support 25% per annum. And that's what this report indicates. And then community grants, a large sum of money there, and you'll see that that is split between a number of projects. So the first project there is the Swan Theatre. Up to this year, we have been funding the Swan Theatre to the tune of about £120,000 per annum. I'm pleased to say that over the lifetime of the funding, the Swan Theatre has received about £1.1 million of support from the City Council. But unfortunately, I think it's very difficult for us to continue with that level of support. Earlier in the year, members agreed that we would transfer the Swan Theatre to effectively the Worcester Theatres on a long lease at nil cost. And as part of that agreement, there is a clause that exits us from any commitment to ongoing support to the theatre past the end of this March. But you will see here the recommendation from officers is not to end the support abruptly, completely, but to reduce the funding down. I've had a number of meetings with the Chief Exec very recently in terms of the content of this report. So it doesn't come as a surprise. It comes with some disappointment, I think, from both parties, but with no surprise. The other elements in there are 3 choirs, Worcester Arts Council, as mentioned, and Lippard Hub. And then we have a council grants pot. That has been reduced significantly, but remains in order for us to give out relatively small amounts of funding to community projects in the region of £500 to maybe up to a couple of thousand. That's how that's been deployed previously, a relatively small amount of money. The next one, rather gloriously titled MD's Grants. It's not my own money, just to make that clear, but I have been party to administering the grant in consultation with the chair and vice chair of this committee. That has been reduced by 50%. We are now down to a relatively small amount of money. In the past, the council has supported Mela and Elgar festivals, and the proposition is that with a relatively smaller amount of funding, we make an allocation to those festivals to continue for this next year, rather than go out and seek bids for what is a relatively small amount of money. So that's the recommendation there, and that recommendation is expanded slightly in the briefing note that's been tabled. And then active travel, we have an internal team of active travel officers. a number of those are on fixed-term contracts. This funding would allow us to carry on funding that post for an additional 6 months so we can continue with our own active travel agenda. I'll stop at that point and ask if there are any questions before then moving on to the existing UK SPF projects that we are proposing to continue. Thank you, Chair.
Jill, then Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. At 2.8, I think it is, we've got the list of the projects that are likely to benefit in the event that we do get that levelling up money. And I know we don't know that yet. But I was just wondering, I thought back last year we were thinking about the Scala and Corn Market further development being part of that. Is it missing for a reason?
For a reason, in as much that these are external partner projects rather than an internal council property project. Okay. But of course, it will still be within members' gift if members wish to allocate some of the money here to the Scala and Corn Exchange project.
Thank you. Adrian?
I wonder, David, can you just clarify on the Worcester Runs Wheels and Festival? It says there's a 25% tapering reduction and 5% additional reduction.
Yeah, sorry, I should have made clearer earlier, actually. So within the allocation, the council is allowed to apportion 5% for administration of the projects, and so that's what I've done. If you see right at the bottom of Appendix 1, you'll see staff costs, and that's a balancing figure of just below. It's not actually up. It comes in slightly below 5%, but that balancing figure is there to cover some of the staff costs for administering the programme.
Thank you, David. I've got Tor, then Hannah, then Edward.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to make a point of what a shame it is that, you know, we are seeing such a loss of, you know, I guess enrichment and support for the people of Worcester. It just feels like we have so much of this, I guess, continued austerity in this area. And I just want to point out what a shame that is, really. And thank you for updating us about the Levelling Up Fund. It'd be really nice to know about things like the Levelling Up Fund, about things like the, what's the other one I mentioned earlier, the HS2 funding. It feels like it must be such a hard job for officers and also for members to put together budgets and agree on budgets when essentially we don't know. And I don't know, it just feels like, and I don't think you're going to be able to answer this question, but when are the government going to get their act together and tell us?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Ever the optimist, the government has announced a number of initiatives. So, for example, the government have announced that it will be establishing a national business support growth funded programme. And so, for example, within the existing UK SPF projects, we are suggesting 95,000 to support the Growth Hub. The government have already come out and said that the growth hubs that are run across the country will form the spine of the new business support programme that will be announced. And in Worcester, the government have committed £250,000 of match funding towards the Growth Hub programme. So I think there are other things coming along. The government has also announced I can't remember the exact title, so you'll have to forgive me, but a National Connected to Work programme where it is where the aim is to help people that are out of work back into employment. And that is a contract that is being given to the county council. In all two-tier areas, that contract is going to the upper tier authority for a single programme across the county. And if you look at the numbers around the number of starts and the unit grant payment for each person on the programme have been published as part of the government announcement. And whilst it will take some time to ramp up to the full number, once the full number is achieved, that is about a £3 million programme for Worcestershire. So I very much hope that as some of these smaller projects come to an end, the government is very much going to announce national programmes that will pick up where these programmes left off.
Anything else, Tom? Thank you, David. No. Hannah?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say exactly what Councillor Pingree was going to say, that it's just such a shame that we've been given £1 million less than the previous government. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise a sort of general concern and theme for perhaps future discussions and future negotiation around budget allocation. It really seems to me, being as we are in Warndon and seeing the wave of antisocial behaviour that we've had to deal with, which has often been coming at great cost to the Community Trust and sort of other partner organisations, it seems to me that if our skills and training funding is going to be spent most effectively, there is a missing bridge between kids on the street who are getting into trouble and the classroom where they're going to be picking up the skills that help them to get into careers. And I just want to highlight, I think, the yawning gap which has been left by the absence of youth clubs and youth activities. And I think if it's possible to ensure that there is a decent share allocated for improving youth services, I think that would be money very well spent, bridging that gap between getting into trouble and developing the skills to actually lead a more useful and productive life. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think it's a very good point. And if you look at the existing programmes, which again I'll come on to in a moment, the Careers Hub at 142,000, which is the single biggest recommendation that we're making in terms of support, that programme delivered by the county in partnership with DWP and various other partners is working hard to make sure that we don't have any young people that end up not in education or employment or training in any shape or form, and has been very successful. So, but I take your point about community support, and that's one of the reasons why we're suggesting a very marginal reduction for Worcester Community Trust, who operates across 6 hubs across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anything else, Edward?
Well, I just wanted to follow up and say I think it's obviously very important that we continue engaging with the Community Trust to make sure that, again, that the money that is being spent, because there's obviously a fair amount of money going into them, it's making sure that it is spent effectively, and I hope that we're doing all we can to support and advise them to make sure it is spent effectively in the light of the antisocial behaviour we're trying to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Sarah and then Jill.
Thank you, Chair. That's an absolute perfect introduction to what I just wanted to speak about with regard to Lippard. And I speak as a proud supporter and trustee of Lippard. It's an asset which exemplifies the very best of community spirit, resilience and innovation, and for over 3 decades has stood at the heart of Warndon villages, not just as a building, but as a lifeline for countless residents across Worcester. So you spoke about youth services. The hub services reach people at all stages of life, from new parents looking for, through their Baby and Me programme, to teenagers in the youth club, and older residents who are rediscovering joy at coffee mornings or through a walking group. The hub is there, and it bridges those gaps that so often leave people feeling isolated, lonely, or unsupported. There's a dementia support session, there's a bereavement cafe. All these services provide a critical lifeline to people, not just in Warndon villages, that, you know, people come from outside Warndon villages to use these services. There's a clothing exchange, which not only helps families who are struggling to buy clothes for their children, but it actively reduces waste in our community. We have a creative, inclusive, and deeply impactful service there that ensures that everyone who walks through the door feels valued and supported. I've been really proud to support Lippard Hub through my councillor allowance. I've often donated to projects that are running within the hub. It's a very limited amount, as we know, and so it can only make a small impact, but it's allowed me to witness firsthand how even a modest contribution can help to sustain a vibrant community. I don't know whether any of you have ever visited the Lippard Hub, but I would urge you to do so. It's always busy, it's always welcoming, there's always joy and laughter. It's a lovely space to be in. And that's just, everything that it does reinforces my belief in its essential role in our community. It's facing many challenges: rising costs in energy, national insurance, wages, some essential repairs. They all threaten the hub's ability to sustain the invaluable services they provide. So while the trustees have done a remarkable job in stretching every grant and resource, we can't do it alone. We really do value and rely upon the support of the City Council. And I've come here tonight. I was here to support Ray, who couldn't come because he wasn't very well, but really just to urge colleagues to recognise the continued and much needed funding. It's not just a gift, but it's an investment in the well-being of our citizens. Touches the lives of over 1,600 people every single week and keeps our communities connected and supported and thriving. Without funding, we risk losing more than a building. It's the beating heart of Warndon villages, and we owe it to volunteers, to families, and the countless individuals who rely on Lippard Hub to ensure that it has a secure future. So I urge you this evening and in the future too, to reaffirm that commitment to the community asset and invest in what truly matters: people, neighbourhoods, and the future of Worcester. As I said, if you want to visit the Hive, if you want to visit the Hub, which is a hive of activity, I'm sure Lauren would be really pleased to welcome you and show you around and explain to you everything that goes on there. And thank you for that continued support. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And Jill.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo what Ed was saying about the importance of having youth services. And I think it's also important to remember that WCT only provide youth events at 3 of the 6 hubs, and Warndon's not one of them. So they've paid out more than £125,000 in repairing various buildings that haven't got services. That could have been spent on youth worker. And I think that the direction that they choose to fulfil their obligations needs to be influenced more so that we can get a more even spread of what they're doing.
Thank you. I'll just cover the second element of the appendix and then say a few words in terms of summary before I hand over to the chair, who will pick up the briefing note emerging from the town board meeting. So you'll see below the subtotal 396, then there are a list of existing UK SPF projects that we recommend are continued. The first of one of those is the Growth Hub, which is a hub in each of the, the staff are employed by Worcester City as a host organisation, but reporting to the local enterprise partnership. And that's a service run across the whole of the county, providing business support to all businesses. There is a marginal reduction there. The Careers Hub I've already mentioned, that is delivered in collaboration with a number of partners, including DWP, and has proved to be successful operating out of the Hive. The skills support line, there were previously a large number of skills support. There was support for green skills, there was WCT skills to support people back into employment, and then there was a project called Skills Boost, which was not as successful as some of the others. Because of the significant reduction in funding available, we have just set aside that single figure of 47,500 to cover skills generally. I propose that, or the recommendation is that we go out to seek proposals in terms of how that money is spent, and it could cover a number of things, but in all honesty, it's a relatively small amount compared to where we were before. But as I said, there are national programmes coming along, and I just want to pick that up in my final comments. Business grants, council business grants is the service that we provide as a city council to help businesses grow, take on new staff, buy new kit, employ more people. Relatively small amounts of funding that we give out annually, and we're recommending that we carry on with that. And then arts and culture events. As many of you will know, we are approached throughout the year to support arts and culture events, everything from the annual, I'm just trying to think of the right word, what's the bit that goes around the city with the vehicles, and what's the word I'm looking for? That, we do that. I just had a mental blank on what I was going to call it. We also have requests for rainbow festivals and various others. We get a number of those in throughout the year, so we are recommending that we carry on with a small amount of money aimed at that. Although, as you'll see in the recommendations, there's a slight change. That comes to 351. Staff costs as a roundup, that gives us 785,000. The last point I want to make, because I think it would be remiss of me not to do so, is the statement in bold at the top of the appendix. This is a one-year allocation. I think I would be surprised if we get any money next year, if I can put it that way, at all. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last year of UKSBF. So all of the things that we're doing on this list now, we won't be able to fund. We have a £900,000 deficit this coming year. The deficit in 26, 27, is that the right year? Yeah. Is even greater than where we stand for the coming year. So it's a really, I think in terms of messages back to partners, it's a really big reality check that we are just not going to be how to do things. And even where we have, a commitment for a tapering funding support, it may be that, that is always subject to us having the money to do it. It may be even some of those we can't carry on. At the town deal board meeting last week, Tom Collins MP was present, and one of the discussions we had was how it is important for us as a council and stakeholders over the coming year to work to find alternative funding sources for these things. I think prudently everybody should be working on the basis that the council will not fund these things after this year, and if it does fund them, it will be a welcome bonus. Clearly Tom's view was that we should be embarking on looking at other funding streams. We should look to work closely with the government if it's bringing in a new business growth programme to make sure that we have the flexibility to cover some of the things that we deliver locally in the future. So without reducing the mood even further, if that's possible, I just think it's important to make sure that people do really understand the significance of the situation and don't work on the basis that, you know, we will have another year of this after the coming year. I think it's probably quite doubtful. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So I've had a couple more chances to see these figures than most of the members in this room. It is with mixed feelings that we have this report in front of us. I'm glad that this year we're able to support the projects that we are supporting, but not to the extent that we would love to have done last year. So I'd like to thank officers off the hat for coming up with these recommendations and working on this report. As David has already pointed out, we had the Towns Deal Board earlier last week, where they asked us to merge a couple of budget lines. So, and these are outlined in the briefing note that's been placed on at your place. So I'd like to suggest that we accept those as part of the recommendation, as part of the proposed project interventions. I just want to say, this is not the first time we, as members, will get to look at this. It is not the last time we'll get to look at it. There's an opportunity at PNR and an opportunity at full council to review these figures and project allocations. I just want to paraphrase Sean, if I may. It is within our gift to make decisions. It is within our gift to move money around in these allocations. So officers advise and we decide. So I'm just going to throw that out there now. If anybody wants to make any amendments to the recommendations here, then please make your voices heard. Or we'll just pass this on as a recommendation to the PNR committee. So that seems fair enough to me. Just one, so we'll accept the recommendations that were in the briefing paper. I would also like to make a recommendation to PNR that we look at simplifying the grants process and that we look at making members more involved in that grants process, either directly or indirectly post hoc the grants being provided. So with that in mind, all those in favour of the recommendations, including my amendments, please let me know. That looks fairly unanimous to me. No abstentions, no noes. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. That was a difficult report to go through. Final agenda item of the evening then is the setting of the budget for 2025 and MTFP to 2029-30. I'd like to welcome Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the next stage in the setting of the budget for 25-26, and committee are asked to review the proposed budgets that are set out in the appendices to this report. Appendix 1 is a excerpt from the budget book for all of the services within this committee's remit. The changes are mainly in relation to inflationary increases on pay and contract budgets, but we have also reduced the income budget on planning income, which more reflects the current position on levels of income in 24-25. Appendix 2 is the capital programme. This is for all of the council. You'll note that the three main budgets on there are projects supported by Towns Fund, Future High Streets, and then the other main one is the crematorium improvements to the cremators. That's the bulk of that budget for next year. And finally, we have Appendix 3, which is a summary of the medium-term financial plan. So that shows you we have a budget gap, as David mentioned, of 905,000. And the plan that was agreed by PNR last week was to meet that gap through a financial sustainability plan. So this is the opportunity for members to consider those budgets and make any proposals for amendments or any additional items they'd like, bearing in mind we have a budget deficit of 905,000 already. So I'll pass that over to you for your comments and questions. Thank you.
Anybody, any questions for Catherine? Any amendments? Any additional items? Okay, I'll just ask some questions myself, if I may. So we've got the base budget. Thank you. There's obviously some science gone into this, Catherine, so thank you again. There are some stark differences between the base budget for 2024-25 and then the draft base budget for next year. So things like third-party payments, for instance, we're looking at spending 2,254,000 plus this year on third-party payments, but our anticipation next year is that we go down to 844k.
So from memory, Chair, I think that's from things that are supported by reserve grants. So things such as Towns Fund and actually, no, I'll correct that. The majority of this is UK SPF grant that was built into the base for 24-25. We haven't yet built into the base for 25-26 because we're waiting for agreement to this report. So that would be the main difference there. Most of those have gone through on those third-party payments budgets.
Okay, thank you. I think that was majorly my biggest query. So thank you.